Alpine's F1 team boss has resigned, Jack Doohan's been demoted with immediate effect, and his replacement Franco Colapinto's only got a 5-race guarantee. Yep, F1's most chaotic team has become engulfed in fresh controversy that sets a new standard for self-inflicted chaos. The shock, immediate resignation of team principal Ollie Oakes came the evening before Alpine officially confirmed Colapinto will replace Doohan from the next race at Imola. This is, according to Alpine and its executive advisor Flavio Briatore, a coincidence rather than a response to the controversial decisions. They said the reasons for Oakes resigning are not related to the team and are of a personal nature. We understand Briatore informed Doohan after last Sunday's Miami Grand Prix that he would be replaced, despite Briatore and Alpine previously indicating that Doohan would be kept on until the summer. Now Colapinto's been given a short-term deal starting from the next race at Imola after Alpine opted to rotate its second seat alongside Pierre Gasly. Alpine says it's part of an ongoing assessment of its driver lineup, with Colapinto getting the race chance he expected after joining from Williams as Alpine's test and reserve driver in January. The initial 5-race plan comprises the upcoming European triple header of Imola, Monaco and Barcelona, plus the Canadian and Austrian Grand Prix. Alpine will then re-evaluate its lineup before the British Grand Prix at Silverstone in July. In explaining the decision, Briatore claimed it was the result of the field being so close and Alpine having made so much progress over the last 12 months. This implies Briatore doubts Doohan would tidy things up and get to the level required to consistently score points in the midfield. He also referenced the importance of 2026, when Alpine switches to being a Mercedes customer and expects to take a strong step forward in performance, so must have a complete and fair assessment of the drivers this season to choose the right teammate for Gasly next year. But another way to look at it is that Alpine doesn't know who will be its driver, or its team boss now that Oakes has resigned. This is messy even by this team's standards, so where to begin unpicking it? The driver lineup change follows a difficult first 6 races of 2025 for Doohan, who has had 2 first lap crashes in Australia and Miami and picked up penalties in both the sprint and main race in China. He also crashed heavily in free practice in Japan. On top of that, Doohan is yet to score a point, although it did outqualify Gasly for the first time in Miami before colliding with Liam Lawson at the first corner and retiring from the race. Briatore thinks that 6 races was long enough to see if Doohan has it, and he doesn't think that's the case. So although Doohan could potentially return to an Alpine race seat in the future, which we will explain later in this video, it's possible his F1 career has already ended. Doohan's season had actually begun relatively brightly in terms of underlying pace, but he's had an unfortunate trend of not piecing together complete weekends or delivering on the potential he has shown. And this was a massive problem given the high probability of a change. Alpine signed Doohan to the race seat last summer, but it's been obvious that his place was at risk since Briatore first showed interest in Colapinto last year, then finally signed him from Williams in January. As likely as a swap seemed this season, it was never guaranteed. The sand shifted more than once, and until recently, a change wasn't certain at all. Unless, of course, Doohan supposedly getting the all clear until the summer really was just a successful ploy from Briatore to flush out more Colapinto backing from Latin America. Just the very notion of that play being possible indicates why the situation was unsustainable. It created an underlying tension, with Doohan trying to thrive in a compromised environment and the likes of Oakes trying to work with and justify an arrangement created by Briatore. Inevitably, after a fairly assured start, Doohan started to exhibit the first signs of a driver feeling like he was losing his own team's backing. He didn't feel like he got the support he deserved after his Suzuka FP2 crash, for example, and he lashed out over the radio in Miami sprint qualifying. When he didn't translate his promise into results quickly enough and the list of setbacks grew, and all the while the noise around him continued, Doohan started to react a little more emotionally, which perhaps also limited the likelihood he'd pull it all together. That just made it easier for Briatore to do what he wanted all along. The exact motivations are unlikely to be fully disclosed, but beyond the issues with Doohan, Briatore has always seen a competitive and commercial upside to Colapinto. The young Argentinian driver made a strong first impression when he joined Williams for a part season last year and scored points despite his inexperience, although he did then have a mix of crashes and more difficult race weekends. Colapinto may prove to be a similar crash risk to Doohan and may not be a superstar in the making either, but he is a proven point scorer already and is a driver with ability. And of course, he has also attracted that strong backing that has carried over to Alpine, initially in limited form, but supposedly now more significantly. And so on to the real surprise in all of this, Oakes' resignation less than a year after taking on the team principal job. Alpine has been beset by self-inflicted chaos and controversy for years, and Oakes had been committed to settling it down upon his arrival last summer, a few months after Briatore was drafted in by Renault boss Luca Di Maio as the most senior figure. But now, Oaks' name gets added to a long list of senior team personnel to leave this team in its Alpine era alone. It's hard not to wonder when De Meo will stand up and take some responsibility for a shambolic level of turnover, but with his man Briatore still at the helm, that won't happen anytime soon. The most recent Alpine leadership dynamic was reminiscent of the peak Red Bull era, where Helmut Marko had almost unlimited decision-making power and Christian Horner was the public face of the team. Obviously, at Alpine, Briatore was the Marko and Oaks was the Horner. We know that Briatore's driver dealings had caused at least a little friction in their time working together and left Oaks slightly compromised, but they still had a good relationship, and a short Oaks statement said Briatore had been like a father to him. Nonetheless, it hadn't always been completely smooth, as Oaks had been forced to rationalise decisions in public that he hadn't made. He became the frontman for things that were either put in place before his arrival, like the decision to axe the engine project and stop being a works team, or moves that he potentially didn't agree with. This included Esteban Ocon's shock early exit at the end of last year before the season finale, another brutal decision taken by Briatore, and the fallout as Colapinto's arrival meant Doohan was placed under instant scrutiny. There was a difference of opinion between Briatore and Oaks over what to do on drivers, with Oaks a staunch supporter of Doohan, even if he had some doubt over his ultimate potential, and wary of a destabilising effect within the team by bringing in Colapinto. Primarily though, Oaks was known to feel that the way things were playing out undid some of the work that had been undertaken to turn things around at Enstone. As the team worked to prepare Doohan for his rookie season and even put him in for his debut in that 2024 finale, efforts were effectively undermined by Briatore identifying Colapinto as a necessary signing. Now Briatore has pushed through with his intentions and taken issue with the interpretation from many, including us, that it triggered Oaks' resignation. The official line is that Oaks' exit is unrelated and down to personal reasons rather than the driver swap being the final straw. If so, it is a remarkable coincidence, but hopefully not reflective of anything too troublesome. Did you know you can get 75% off a membership with us if you take out our latest special offer on Patreon? It's a great time to check out the Race Members Club, including bonus podcasts and videos, exclusive behind-the-scenes insights, the chance to ask questions for our shows, community groups where you can chat with us and like-minded fans, and you get all of our regular podcasts and YouTube videos ad-free. So if you want to become the ultimate insider, head to Patreon via the link we've posted below to claim this limited time offer. This is a sliding doors moment for Alpine, with Briatore now completely in control of all aspects rather than delegating the day-to-day management of certain areas. While Oaks seemed to have little total decision-making power, he was clearly trying to mould Alpine more to his liking and had made changes to the senior trackside team for the start of 2025. It's not clear if Briatore will want to unpick that and remove some of the Oaks people that had joined to give Oaks the support he felt he'd needed on race weekends. This includes Dave Greenwood, once Kimi Raikkonen's race engineer, who was hired in the new role of racing director, while ex-Williams man Richard Lockwood became strategy and sporting director. If Briatore thinks that's working well, he'll keep it the same rather than make changes for the sake of it. If not, Briatore has not hesitated in imposing his will on bigger picture parts of the Renault F1 project, so it'll be interesting to see how he works on the details. Ultimately, Briatore led Enstone to world titles in the past, with back-to-back championships in 1994 and 1995, and then again in 2005 and 2006. So his methods are controversial, but his track record is strong. However, it comes from a very different era of F1. And right now, there's no hard evidence that Alpine's going to be led to anything more than just being a credible midfield team again, which is just par for the course regardless of who has been in charge. In fact, all that's certain is that the cycle of upheaval continues, regardless of the reasons why, and Alpine's new chapter is proving just as dramatic and potentially self-defeating as those that came before. Apart from waiting to see if Briatore appoints another team principal, and if this time he just wants an out-and-out stooge to be his right-hand man, his reference to getting the driver choice right for 2026 means further changes later in the year are possible. Doohan remains at Alpine and will be its first choice reserve during Colapinto's 5-race stint. A return to a race seat has not been ruled out, but realistically, the chances of coming back from a demotion are low, at least in the same team. Alpine's taken a leaf out of Red Bull's book with this change, but their F1 rejects tended to get second chances at Red Bull's second team or somewhere else on the grid. They didn't get their original seat back. And there's little, if anything, Doohan can do to stake a claim to be reinstated while just sitting around as a reserve. He's relying on Colapinto underperforming, and even if that happens, there's no guarantee that it's Doohan who just slots back in. We know that Briatore has met with Sergio Perez's representatives and longtime backer Carlos Slim. Perez is a low percentage option for 2026, and it could just be a way for Briatore to start speaking with Slim about facilitating more backing from Latin America for Colapinto. but it's worth keeping tabs on. And the other aspect is Alpine's desire to evaluate its lineup could mean giving another of its reserves a chance, Paul Aron, who is highly rated and understood to have impressed with his speed in private testing. Aron did drive for Oaks' high-tech team in junior categories and joined Alpine after Oaks arrived as team principal though, so where he sits in Briatore's own pecking order is unknown. But if all Briatore really cares about is performance rather than personal agendas or commercial potential, Aron could become as much of a threat to Colapinto as the new Alpine race driver was to Doohan.